Let me repeat that sentence. Taryata om avaloki lokate karante eharahi maha bodhisattva sava sava mala mala mahima hridayam kuru kuru kamam duru duru vijyate maha vijyate. Now we stop at sava sava mala mala mahima hridayam. I stop at that point and I start to explain the meaning of Zava Zava and Mala Mala. The whole mantra of compassion, every word contains a lot of meaning in it, and you must know how to reflect on the meaning of every word. Like Mala Mala, metaphorically, it means garbage, garbage. It means mental afflictions and mental afflictions. So Sava Sava means all mental afflictions arises from where? Mahima Hridayam. Mahima is great and profound. From Hridaya, Hridayam that means the heart. Metaphorically, the heart means the mind. This is my gratitude from the bottom of my heart. Your heart physically cannot show the gratitude. It's metaphorically, it's from the heart, but it's from the mind. But since the ancient days, we have been using the heart as the mind, as the very important part of the body. All emotions originate, we think, from the heart, but it's from the mind. So this sentence here is very important that you should understand how our mind functions. To understand Buddhism, you must know how to analyze the mind. Analyze all the mental afflictions that originate from the mind. How do they originate? How do we see things? How do we form opinions? How do we discriminate? How do we discern and judge? And how do we attach to obstinacy? And how emotions arise. All these we have to study. So it's very important that we should recap and reiterate on what we have learned in every session so that we can reinforce in our mind as to how we think. If you study Buddhism from the perspective of just blessings, you're losing the most important point. Buddhism is the study of the mind, and how do you create that mind of urging for purity, and how do you, when your mind goes astray into mental afflictions, how do you put it back and put it in the right place? And that is what the Diamond Sutra is all about. If you studied the Diamond Sutra before, in the second chapter, when Subhuti asked the questions, how did Subhuti ask the question? Subhuti asked, meritorious men and women, when they have already produced the mind for enlightenment and pursuing Anuttara Samya Sambuddhi, how do they, this is a question addressed to the Tathagata, to the Buddha, how do they maintain their mind in the right path, always in the right path, and in case it goes astray into mental afflictions, how do they control their mind? That's a very important question. And the whole Diamond Sutra concentrates on how do you control your mind? How do you maintain your mind in righteousness? So that's the reason why we have to spend more time into it, into this Mala Mala Mahi Mahidayam. So every time when you chant the mantra of compassion, Zava Zava Mala Mala Mahi Mahidayam, then you know that's what it means. Just to recap, because it's a very complicated subject, I need to recap it so that every time is like a review. What is this mind of ours? This mind of ours has two aspects to it. One is the surface mind, or the superficial mind. The other is the deep mind. or one is the conscious mind, the other is the subconscious mind. The conscious mind always imagines it's on top, and the subconscious is it's subliminal, it's in the lower level, it's a profound lower level. So the conscious mind being the service mind that you can feel it, the subconscious mind is very difficult to feel. You're not conscious of it, you're not aware of it unless you pro into it, unless you understand it, unless you, like meditators, you dig deep into it, then you know about it. Otherwise, most people, they don't know about it. They just let their conscious mind interact with objects in their daily lives and use the emotions to respond to it. That's how ordinary people do. Emotions being crying, smiling, laughing, depressed, feared, anxiety, you name them. They use emotions. They run the whole gamut of emotions to respond to objects, things they see, things they hear, things they interact with. That's what ordinary people do. But being meditators, you know deeper, you don't react on emotions. You react with intelligence, with wisdom. This is how we should dig into it. So we have the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. This is also good for people who like to introduce Buddhism to other people. You know, just the study of the mind. How do you analyze your mind? You should voice it out. You should know how to do it. So the conscious mind contains 6 minds. If we categorize it, the 6 minds. The first mind, the conscious mind, the first one, the 6 minds, the first mind, or mind is consciousness, or the first consciousness. Or you can say the conscious mind contains 6 consciousnesses. The Sanskrit for consciousness is vijnana. Or you can say the conscious mind contains 6 vijnanas. V-I-J-N-A-N-A, vijnanas. The first one, the first consciousness is visual consciousness. The second one is auditory consciousness, visual, auditory consciousness. The third one is regarding the nose, olfactory consciousness, your nose smells. The fourth one is gustatory consciousness regarding the taste. The fifth one is tactile consciousness regarding touching. Now, these are the 5 forerunning consciousnesses, the 5 senses. The 5 senses are what this consciousness adhere to. You got those 5 senses, unless you lose some of these senses. If you lose your eyes, then you don't have visual consciousness. If you lose your ears, you don't have the visual consciousness. You lose your taste, you don't have the gustatory consciousness. So you have those 5 consciousnesses. And this 5 consciousnesses has to interact with a controller, which is the mano consciousness, or the thinking consciousness. Why? Because the visual consciousness only identifies the objects, absorb it like a camera lenses, and then it gets into the inside of the camera and discern it and reflect it on the image. So you need a deeper, a more significant consciousness to control all these 5 senses. We always say this is the controlling manager, being the controller of the corporation. We call it the mano consciousness in Sanskrit, mano. And it's also in the common English, it's the thinking consciousness. But why do we call it mano instead of thinking? Because it's so profound that thinking is it's just one aspect of it. Because when we thought of thinking, we always think of discernment of the present. But actually, this mano consciousness reflects on the past, think about the present, and forecast the future. It contains many, many aspects of thinking. So we can't just say it's thinking. We call it mano to keep its profundity. Okay, so that's the first service mind. That is the conscious mind that you know your senses. But how about the deeper mind, the subconscious mind? The subconscious mind, the first one is the manas consciousness. It's not mano, it's manas, which is the ego consciousness. You don't know that everything you see, everything you interact, you attach your ego to it. You're not conscious of it. Automatically, everything you see, you want to consider from a self-centered perspective of your own. This is mine, this is you. I'm different from you. And this is my possession, that's your possession. This is my car, that is your car. You always build up that self-centered, egoistic thinking in you. And there is a special consciousness assigned to that profundity of egoness. We call it the manas consciousness. And then there's another deep, very deep subconscious mind, which is called the alaya consciousness, A-L-A-Y-A, alaya consciousness, which we call the store consciousness. Why do we have that? Because with all those consciousness, then you start to question, when I die, where does this consciousness go? And how come I know all these things? How come my mind contains so much? It contains the past, the present. How come it contains so much experiences, so many dispositions of it, so many impressions of it? Because why? Because there's a store consciousness that store all these archives, like a disk drive of a computer. And this store consciousness is also the object of the ego consciousness, because the ego consciousness don't attach to just one life ego. The ego is not just one life. You have egoistic attitude of this one life. No. Every life before, every reincarnations before, you have this ego. It's not just in one reincarnation, I don't have an ego, I'm all altruistic, I'm not solipsistic, I'm not selfish. Every life we are selfish, we are egoistic, we don't know about it. So this mana consciousness views the store consciousness as the mother, as the object, attaches to it, like a husband and wife. Like the wife, subservient to the husband. It carries it all the way through without knowing it. So when all the other six consciousness of the conscious mind died away, your eye dies, your ear, your nose, your body is gone, pronounced death, clinically death. You don't have all this consciousness anymore. It shrinks into the alaya consciousness and stored in there with the ego consciousness shrink to it. You don't imagine consciousness as a physical object. That consciousness is invisible. It's like energy. When all these things is gone, where are you? It shrinks into that energy of alaya consciousness, which you can't see it, you can smell it, you can't taste it anymore. It shrinks into an energy, an invisible, profound energy, and that's the nomina for reincarnation. When the body is clinically dead, the last to leave is that alaya consciousness. It leaves the body and goes into a bardo stage, an intermediate stage between the next life. That's called a bardo stage. Well, if you want to study more about the bardo stage, read that book, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It contains a lot of information on bardo stage. Where you in the bardo stage, what are you doing? Well, you know, what, in the 49 days of the bardo stage, you know, all these has deep explanation onto it. Imagine the wisdom of the Buddha. All these things, how come the Buddha know all these things? He knows all these things and he passed on to us. Because after knowing all these things, he got into enlightenment. He surpassed all these things and get into a realm where there's none of these things anymore. All right then. Do you have that background information in mind? If you have that kind of background information in mind, then we can carry on. So, let's do a practical talk using the concepts that we learn in this mind concept. When we cognize something, when we interact with something, what happened to the mind? That's the background information on the denominations, on the meaning of the mind. But what happened, we have to apply Buddhism to daily lives. We still need a course in university, how to apply Buddhism to daily life. That's what we're doing now. How do we apply this study of the mind to our daily life? What do we do when we cognize something? Cognize is cognition when we interact with something. And a person, a thing, anything. When your senses are in interaction with all these things, what happened when we cognize something? 3 subjective transformations happen simultaneously. We don't know about it, but it just happened like that. We may know some, but there are some we don't know about. That's why we get mad. That's why we commit crime. That's why we committed something that we don't know why we're doing it. It's just on the spur of the moment that we did it because we don't know. We'll react on impulse. We'll react with ignorance. So don't react with ignorance. We get more into it. When we cognize something, there is an automatic and instantaneous pouring out, exuding of past experiences, present disposition and impressions from our alaya consciousness. That means our archives is working all the time simultaneously, not by sequence. That's why when we look at something, many things happened when we analyze it. The alaya consciousness that retain impressions of all our past experiences first acts to transform the object of cognitions. We have utterly no control on what we pour out. In other words, we have our karma, we have our past experiences, past impressions, past dispositions, and at the same time when we see things, when we hear things, when we taste things, all our past experiences, it pours out to interact with it. You're cutting on your sirloin steak, put it in your mouth. Oh, it tastes good. It tastes sour. It tastes bitter. Because why? Because you have the bitterness experiences before. You have the sour experiences before. And the archives immediately interact with it. Because if you have never tasted bitterness, you don't know what bitterness is all about. You don't know what sweetness is. All your past experiences exude out to pour on that sirloin steak you're cutting. A lot of experiences. How much does it cost? Gee, it doesn't worth it. It cost me $36. I do it at home for $5. All these things come out at the same time. It looks, the plating looks terrible. I used to have a cherry on the side of it, or some parsley on the top to make it look nice. Terrible. You're passing judgment at the same time. We cannot help but taking that which is first subjectively transformed as the cognized object. And this subjective transformation is a reflection of what we've got in the past, which is what is the past? It's none other than yourself. Somebody else's past? Your own past. That transformation is a reflection of the past experiences, which is none other than yourself. We've been jealousy, we have jealousy, hatred, fear, depression, boo, all these things work at the same time. That's from the archives. We bring the archives first, the alaya consciousness, the store consciousness. What is the function of the store consciousness? It is a storekeeper. It has a capacity to store, and it houses the ego consciousness. Its husband and wife go together. And at the same time, the function of the wife, the manas consciousness, the ego consciousness, the function of the ego consciousness is to continually turn his eyes towards the alaya consciousness as a partner, as someone he loves. He can't get rid of it. He loves his past as a self and to attach to it. Don't you like yourself? Even if you hate yourself, it's still an attachment of the ego. This is easy to see how selfishness cannot but bring great influence to bear on the objects that we see, that we hear, that we listen, that we consider. So after the alaya consciousness subjectively transformed the object, then on top of this, we imbued greater influence to objects according to the self-centeredness emanating from the manas consciousness, emanating from the ego consciousness. This is the second subjective transformation. You attach an ego to it. So how complicated our mind is. You see how complicated you are? I am. So the process of subjective alteration, this two, the alaya consciousness and the manas consciousness, does not stop here. Does not stop. There's simultaneously, there's another subjective transformation occurring at the same time in addition to this. What is that? That is all the other superficial consciousness, the eye, the ear, the nose, the thinking, and all that, including the sixth consciousness, which is the controlling consciousness, which is the thinking consciousness. It's instantaneously and directly associated with a wide range of varying psychological functions, with wholesome things, unwholesome things, and neutral things. Why? Because this guy, this controlling consciousness is working with 51 mental factors at the same time when you cognize an object, when you interact with an object. And it's very important that you understand the 51 mental factors. The 51 mental factors in which contain all the mental afflictions, unwholesome mental afflictions. It also contains the wholesome mental factors. So if you understand these 51 mental factors, then every time when you think, you know that you should purify your mind. So let's get into the 51 mental factors now. The 51 factors have 5 broad categories to it. Yeah, you can take notes down. The first one is always present. Whenever you think, whenever you hear, you smell, whenever your mind works, these factors always are interacting with these factors. Think about this way. Your 6 consciousnesses, in the Chinese language, they designate it as the mind kings. The mind kings lead ministers to associate and help the mind kings to carry out functions. Some of these ministers are good ministers, being the wholesome ministers. Some of these ministers are unwholesome ministers. And some of these ministers are sitting on the fence. Like in the parliament, there's the neutral ministers. In the next election, they will get the votes because they don't want to infuriate any parties. So there are wholesome ministers, unwholesome ministers, and neutral ministers. Now, omnipotent factors, whenever each one of these consciousness work, omnipotence means they all work. In every time they work. Some of the ministers don't work when the mind king works, you know. But this one, this omnipotent factor, which is the first category, there are other 4 categories too. Within this first categories of omnipotent factors, there are 5 ministers. So in this, what do you call that? Portfolio? Is that called portfolio? I don't know. It contains 5 offices: attention, contact, sensation, perception, and volition. In other words, every time when my consciousness work, all these ministers work. They all work. They won't say, I don't work at this. If they don't work, you cannot interact you cannot interact. For example, attention. If I see something, if I see you, if I don't pay attention to you, I don't know it's you. If my mind is thinking about something, if I see Lee in here, I don't know that's Lee, because my attention is not there. When I'm eating something, if I'm so depressed, if I'm so sad, or if I'm so happy, I don't know how it tastes, because I don't have attention to the tasting now, because I'm involved in other things. So in order for that consciousness to work, you've got to have attention. The minister of attention will work at the same time. Attention. I'm talking to you now. If I don't pay attention to what I'm trying to say, I cannot say it well. So attention. But simultaneously with the attention, or maybe even a little prior to the attention, there's got to be contact. I see that door, my eyes have to be in contact with that object. If I close my eyes and in contact, how can I see that door? So contact is very important. So my ears are open, and you are singing, you're chanting, so that sound gets into contact with my ears. So if you are in utter sadness or in utter unhappiness, you don't know how your food tastes. You don't know what you're doing. You're so lost in it because you don't have the attention now. So attention, contact. And then sensation. Sensation is, it's pleasurable, it's unpleasurable, it's neutral. So you create a sensation to it at the same time. This minister of attention works. And then it's perception. Perception is you totally receive it and you ponder about it. That's another minister that's worked towards the perception. You listen to a sound, you listen to some chanting, you listen to someone singing, for example. So you have contact with the sound, you pay attention to the sound, you perceive it sensationally, it's pleasurable, it's unpleasurable, it's neutral, maybe it's pleasurable. Attention, contact, sensation, perception, you hear something, you conceptualize it, it's good, it's pleasurable. Volition, what is volition? Because of contact, attention, sensation, and perceptions, you perform something out, you form a thought. You formulate a thought, this is really nice. That final thought you formulate, volitions. Or you formulate into an action. I want to rewind that and hear it again. Volitional action, volitional thought. So there's omnipotent factors, always present with every consciousness. No exception, otherwise it doesn't work. Next is, the next category or portfolio is objective contingent factors or specific mental factors. 5, also 5 ministers working in there. What are these? The previous 5, they work whether it is wholesome or unwholesome or neutral. They work in doing bad things and doing good things and unwholesome things. They always work. It's just they are workers. In this objective contingent specific factors, they don't generally work. They're only specific to certain work. In other words, they may be specific to wholesome things, or they may be specific to unwholesome things. Now, what are these 5? The first one is desire. The second one is resolved. The third one is memory. The fourth one is concentration. The fifth one is intelligence. What is desire? Desire is your intention. You desire to be good. You desire to continue listening. You desire to turn it off. Resolve is you understand it. You desire, for example, get rid of that listening sound as an example. You desire to follow the Buddha's teaching. So in that mental ministers, the minister of desire, it works. I want to get enlightenment. I want to live like the Buddhist way of living. I want to be pure. So you desire to do something. In other words, you have an objective in mind. You have a destination to tread your path to walk. So it's very important that you create desire in you. When you create desire in you, it's still a thinking process. A good desire. On the other hand, you can have a bad desire. I desire to hurt that guy. I want to hurt that guy because he cheated me. He borrowed $50,000 from me. He signed a contract. Now it expires. He has not returned his money. Now I'm broke. And I asked for the return of money. He didn't return it. He doesn't really care. He said, you can sue me if you want. I'm going to hurt him. This is desire. Unwholesome desire. Specific desire. Resolved. What does resolve mean? You understand the whole case. You understand the contract. You understand what happens to you. In good things, you want to get enlightenment, you want to learn the Buddhist teaching, you have the desire to do so. You understand the Buddhist teaching, resolve, that means understanding of what you desire, or understanding of your intention. I'm looking at the clock right now. The gong should have been hit. It hasn't, but I can carry on. The third minister is memory. That desire in you, that understanding in you, you always remember it. That guy owed me $50,000. He's not returning it. It's in my mind. I'm always thinking about it. I'm going to get even with it. I'm going to get it back, one way or another. So you always have that mindfulness that you want to do something. On the good side, my desire is to get my degree at UBC. And I understand how I'm going to do it. And I remember that that's my desire in my memory. That's what I want to do. I'm mindful of it. It's a good desire. Good desire, good resolve, good memory. What is the fourth minister who works? Concentration. All this desire, resolve, and memory, you always concentrate in doing it. You have a desire, and one day you forget about the desire, you still have the memory. You let it go, you don't really care. 1 year drift by, you say, I'll drift into the second year. Oh no, I'm not going to go in the second year. I'm going to travel to Asia for another 2 years first, and then come back to do something later. You never can get your degree. You're like a rolling stone that gathers no moss. You don't have concentration. No concentration. But on the good side, you may have concentration. I desire to learn the Buddhist teaching. I understand the Buddhist teaching. I remember the teaching, and I'm going to do meditation. I'm going to target onto it, concentrate onto it. Which one you prefer? The fifth ministers, listening to the gong, which we're going to finish the fifth ministers, the minister of intelligence. Intelligence, that means you have the wisdom. You have the wisdom to gear, to guide your desire, your resolve, your mindfulness and concentration. You have the wisdom to do that. Now this wisdom could be bad wisdom, but we still have to use that intelligence, the wisdom. Why bad wisdom? I want to hurt that guy because he owed me $50,000. I understand every time he travels home, he's all alone by himself. I'm going to remember which road to take, and I'm going to hurt him. And this is what I'm going to do. He must have intelligence to plan all this. A criminal is not a foolish guy. He planned on it. And I'm sure this gentleman knows more than I do than criminals, because he caught so many criminals in his life, I guess. So criminals, they also have intelligence. So I finished 2 portfolio of ministers. I don't know if I used that right word, portfolio. One is omnipotence factors. The other is objective contingent specific factors. So in other words, when all your 6 consciousnesses are working, all these ministers are helping your consciousness to achieve what you want. How complicated our mind is. Very complicated. That's what the Buddha told us. You've got to know it. You've got to put it under control. You've got to maintain it. And finally, you've got to purify it. Once this is all purified, you're on your way to enlightenment. I don't think anyone would justify in saying the Buddhist teaching contains extremely high wisdom unless he studied the mind. Because what I'm telling you is just one portion of what the Buddhist teaching is all about. It's very, very detailed. In other words, when you run a country, other than the monarchy at top, for example, the ministers. How do those ministers work? Ministers have clerical staff. Under the clerical staff, there's a lot of management to it. You think it's easy to run a country? It's not easy. You think it's easy to run your own mind? It's not easy. What happens if you understand thoroughly how to run a country? You become the most enlightened monarch. So you want to be an enlightened monarch of your own country body, of your country, of your what you quote and unquote yourself, or you want to be a Louis XVI? Is it the 16th of the French Revolution, who got guillotined by the French people? There are, of course, enlightened monarchs. There are also foolish, atrocious monarchs. Which one you want to be? Or which one do you learn to be? The Buddha has given you a path of how to be an enlightened monarch.